You mentioned just before Anthony Larkins. He went on to be a larger-than-life judge. This is the Anthony Larkins that I've heard many allude to over the years. What was he like? I interviewed Tom Hughes, QC. I believe Anthony Larkins was godfather to one of his children. And quite a number of people I've interviewed, namely women barristers I've interviewed, said he was excruciating to appear before.
Yeah. Well, he was a bachelor, and I never heard any suggestion that he was gay. I think he was just a genuine bachelor.
And likely to remain so.
Yes. He had a manservant. In fact, very early in my career at the bar, before I actually went back to Newcastle, I'd only been at the bar 3 months, John Williams had an appeal in the High Court as junior to Larkins, and he was jammed, so he got me into it. And in those days, you charged 2/3 of senior counsel's fees. And Larkins, at the time, the average weekly wage was something about £10 a week, and Larkins' fees was 150 guineas, and I was entitled to 100 guineas, which was in a free market I would have got about 25 guineas. So I always remember that, and the appeal was dismissed, but I got my 100 guineas for being his junior in that particular case.
Were they still referring to them as guars in those days?
Yes, 100 guars. There was still, in those days and for a few years later, at least 2 clerks who charged the shilling, so they took in effect 5% of the fee. They were the Marx brothers, spelled M-A-R-K-S, Norman Marx and Edgar Marx. Edgar Marx had been Barwick's clerk. After I'd been at the bar 6 or 7 years and had quite an extensive practice, Norman Marx tried to lure me onto his floor, but I wasn't going up there to pay 5% of my earnings to him. So
who became your clerk instead?
Oh well, my first clerk was when I first came to the bar with John Williams. It was Harry Peel, who was a larger-than-life character. He was a functioning alcoholic, but it didn't interfere with his practice in any shape or form. In fact, clerks used to go to the call-over lists, and Clark would call out numbers, and without a note, Harry had them all in his head, and he could say, yes, well, that's mine, that's Baldock's, or one of his barristers on his floor. But he was a man with a quick temper. He once said to a solicitor, I've shot better men than you, and they were Japs. So he was in the war, as many of the clerks and barristers of those days were. But he had quite a fierce temper. But he was a very personable guy, and I used to float around the 8th floor, which was John Williams's floor. And I used to use his room, and I could use any other room on the floor for a conference if it was vacant. And I used to pay Harry Peel £1 a week. That was the clerk's fee. Then when I came down here, I went into the old university chambers, which is now where the Leagues Club is across the road. The clerk there was Perce Mansfield. And then we moved to the 2nd floor of 174, just one above here, and Perce Mansfield was there. Then Doug Milne had been junior counsel retained by Rupert Murdoch, and he was taking silk, and he suggested to Murdoch's solicitors that they should retain me, and I became retained by Murdoch, and Milne invited me to come up to the 6th floor, and I stayed at the 6th floor for the rest of my career there. So I was there on the 6th floor from 1968 to 1984.
That's right. I'm just looking here at an anecdote that says that you had a friend, the late Kevin Murray QC, on the 2nd floor Wentworth, and you were there on his floor, and that was partly you were friends and made sense to be there. And then later on, as you mentioned, in 1968, you moved to where Doug Milne was.
Yes.
Yes. So, busy years.
Yeah, so from 68 to 84, I went on the Court of Appeal. I was there, and my clerk, apart from the first couple of months when I was there, my clerk was Les O'Brien, who was a wonderful clerk, a great clerk. But there were. When I first went there was Jack Craig, who was a famous clerk, but he retired within a couple of months. He was then replaced for a very short period of time by a fairly young man called Dobson, whose father, Harry Dobson, had been a clerk for many years, but for some reason I've forgotten, I never knew. He didn't last very long there. Then Les O'Brien came there, and he remained there for the rest of my career at there.